Hello friends, and welcome once again to this channel. We are still in the festive season, so happy new year, and I wish you all the best in this year, and I hope that you achieve the goals you have set for yourself in this 2026 and beyond. Hard work is always very important, so as you set your goals, you need to pray and work hard towards the goals, and by God's grace you shall achieve them. Now let me ask you this question. When a nation's natural resources can be claimed by a powerful nation in the name of democracy, then what becomes of the sovereignty of any resource-rich country? And when sanctions, military pressure, and coups destroys an economy, who suffers? Is it the ordinary citizen or the leader that is being hunted? Yesterday it was Iraq and Libya. Today it is Venezuela. So I ask you, who determines which government is legitimate? And what prevents your country's president or your country's government now from being the next to be removed from office or to be arrested? The United States invaded Venezuela and arrested Nicolás Maduro Moros and his wife Célia Flores on the 3rd of January 2026. Now, President Trump has claimed that he has been arrested because he was indicted by the US court for narco-terrorism. And he has claimed that the US will run Venezuela and that the oil in Venezuela belongs to the United States. And so the United States will manage Venezuela's government now until they are able to set up an election to elect a president. Why is the president making these claims? Why is he going to this extent of kidnapping a sovereign country's president? These and many other issues are what we discuss on this channel. So please do us a favor, kindly subscribe and click on the bell notification so that this video can get more recommendations. Now let's get into it. Now let's start with the UN Charter, right? The UN Charter was set up in October 1945, okay, after the Second World War, when the League of Nations failed to stop the Second World War. Most of the partners or the members of the League of Nations withdrew. And so the countries came together, about 50 countries first came together to draft the UN Charter, all right? And in October 1945, it was passed. The Chapter 1 of the UN Charter, which is the purpose, which indicates the purpose of the UN Charter, indicates that the UN Charter is to foster relationship between nations and to help in international transactions among nations and peaceful coexistence of nations, and for nations to be able to support each other in terms of security, trade, and so on. And then it has the Chapter 2, Chapter 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter, which is prohibition of force. It forbids the threat or use of military force by one state against another. It protects a state borders and its right to self-governance from external interference. So this gives sovereign nations the the right of self-determination. The third aspect of it is consistency with UN purpose. Any action must align with the broader goals of the United Nations, primarily maintaining international peace and security. There are exceptions. So for self-defense, it indicates that states have an inherent right to defend themselves against an armed attack. It also states that the Security Council can authorize the use of force to maintain or restore international peace. By this, it means that for a country to invade another country, one, its security must be under threat. So you need to ask yourself, was the United States security under threat? No. The second is that the United Nations must approve on the exercise or the invasion. In this issue, no. The US didn't have any approval from the United Nations. Everything was classified. Even the United States Constitution itself indicates that for the United States to invade another country, it must seek approval from Congress. Congress didn't have briefing. They didn't have any knowledge of this. Even the members, the people who work in the White House didn't have any knowledge of this. It was highly classified. You understand? Now, with all this in place, who is President Nicolás Maduro? Maduro is a Venezuelan president who came into power in 2013 when the then president Hugo Chavez passed on, right? Hugo Chavez was a military leader who transitioned and became the president, right? He staged a coup in 1992 against the then president, and the coup failed. And then Hugo Chavez was tried and jailed. And 2 years into his sentence, he was granted a pardon. And fast forward in 1999, he became the president. He was elected the president of Venezuela from 1999 to 2013. So while Hugo Chavez was in jail, Maduro was one of his allies who campaigned for him, right? He was solely behind his team. So when he became president, Maduro became part of his government, and he held many positions until 2013 when Hugo Chavez died and he became the president. Then in 1 month later, in March 2013, he organized an election and he won. So fast forward in 2018 again, an election was held and Maduro won. He won by 1.5% votes. But the opposition disagreed and said they must have a rerun. And then Maduro refused. Of course, he was the sitting government, so he held on to power. And the US refused to recognize him as a legitimate president. They said he was illegitimate because the election was flawed. It was rigged. So since then, Maduro has had issues with United States governments. So even in the first term of Donald Trump, he placed a 25 million bounty on him, that anybody who is able to arrest President Maduro or try and jail him will take 25 million from the United States government. They accused him that he was running a drug cartel known as Cartel de la Sans, a cartel of the Sans, right? And since then, he has been on the US radar. Biden also added 25 million to what Trump already placed on him, and it became 50 million bounty. That anyone who is able to arrest the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, will take 50 million US dollars. So in 2024, fast forward, right? In 2024, there was election again in Venezuela, and President Maduro won, according to him. But this time, even international bodies declared that the election was rigged and the results was flawed. It was not free and fair. But Nicolás Maduro gripped onto power. That was just before Trump was sworn into office. So when Trump was sworn in again, the second time, the fight continued. He wanted Nicolás Maduro out. Why? The reason was drug and cocaine trafficking or drug trafficking. But there was another reason. And ultimately, Trump mentioned the next reason, that it was due to the oil, that the oil in Venezuela belongs to the United States. This is what he said. And since then, the US have been bombing Venezuelan ships on the sea and claimed that they were carrying narcotics, they were carrying cocaine. They have bombed several ships and killed over 100 people, claiming that they were carrying cocaine. None of them was proven to be true.
For months, the U.S. has built up the Caribbean's largest armada in half a century. 30 strikes on what the U.S. calls narco-terrorist drug boats, the latest in the Eastern Pacific just last night. The capture of 2 sanctioned Venezuelan oil tankers and the chasing of a third tanker that today reportedly requested Russian protection. And today, news the CIA reportedly launched a drone strike along the Venezuelan coast. The reported target, a storage facility operated by the transnational gang Tren de Aragua, which the Trump administration connects without public evidence to Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement. And that is no longer around.
Over 30 that they bombed, they couldn't prove one, right? They couldn't prove that any of them contains narcotic drugs or cocaine. In October this year, right? In October this year, US announced that it was going to deploy security, military artillery towards the coast of Venezuela, and to stop the narco-terrorists from transporting drugs from Venezuela into the United States.
This had been billed as a war on drugs. The US has killed more than 100 people in airstrikes on boats it says were transporting narcotics. But now it sounds like it's really a war for oil.
They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
So the US president kept claiming that they took their oil and they need their oil back, right? And you will not understand this. So he kept saying this every time, and then he started moving. Later, he started moving the military installations towards the coast in October 2025, and he announced this, and the US announced it. US Department of Justice announced it, that they were moving the military installations close to Venezuela, and that was when people started thinking that something is about to happen.
63 high, coming in on target. You need to move a little faster than that, son. Heat is light.
So as you can see, all these military installation ships, warships were moved towards the coast of Venezuela, and then came 3rd January 2026. The US moved about 150, Trump said 152 helicopters, fighter jets, and monitoring planes into Venezuela. And in no time, the entire electricity in Venezuela, in the capital city, was turned down. And this was a strategy that US used to blind their surveillance system, like receiving information that the military chief of Venezuela, the defense chief of Venezuela, was unaccomplished, and that after the operation, the US military arrested him and killed him. And this is how the operation went.
Just then came the wait. 4 days before the launch, the order was nearly given, but the weather did not cooperate. Cloud cover was too thick, so they waited. On Friday night, at 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time, the order finally came. President Donald Trump gave the green light. The clock started ticking. Within minutes, more than 150 aircraft were in motion. Fighter jets, bombers, surveillance planes. They launched from 20 bases across the Western Hemisphere and finally converged over Venezuela. At around 2 a.m. local time, Caracas went dark. U.S. officials say air defenses were hit first. Power was cut across parts of the capital. Then came the explosions. Targets included ports, air bases, and military complexes. Fire lit up the night sky. People woke to the sound of thunder, but there were no storms. As strikes continued, helicopters moved in low, very low. At 2:01 a.m., the helicopters reached Maduro's compound. U.S. Delta Force troops went in, heavily armed, prepared to cut through steel if needed. They moved fast, room to room, corridor to corridor. Then they came under fire. One helicopter was even hit. Still, it managed to stay airborne. Inside the compound, Maduro was already moving. He tried to reach a reinforced safe room, a steel door, built to withstand an attack precisely like this one. But he did not make it. By 4:29 a.m., the helicopters were over open water, Caracas fading behind them, and the mission complete.
So all this time, it was just a blackout, all right? They blocked the whole system in order to be able to hit their targets, right? And they bombed air bases, they bombed ports, they bombed airports, they bombed all the military installations, the major military installations. And that is how they were able to blind their security and get into them. The reason why they said, the reason why people say that Maduro's security were accomplices, people who were taking care of him, people who were guiding him in his own house were accomplices, is because when this happened, before they even struck, they had a sketch of where Maduro was hiding, and they knew all the corners in the house. And that is why it was so easy to get him. And when they invaded, within 15 minutes, they got him, just when he was about to escape. So finally, they got him, they arrested him, and he was taken away. Trump issued a press statement detailing how the operation went on and how they arrested him and what was going to come next. And that was where he indicated that the U.S. was going to take care of the affairs of Venezuela. They were going to run Venezuela and they were going to manage the oil and other things. And that was where he indicated that the oil in Venezuela belongs to them.
Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolás Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Célia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country.
Boom. And that is it. He nailed it.
The country is a mess. It's been horribly run. The oil is just flowing at a very low level, much lower than, even if it was badly run, it should have more income, more oil than what they're doing. So we're going to have the big oil companies go in. They're going to fix the infrastructure. They're going to invest money. We're not going to invest anything. We're going to just take care of the country. We're going to cherish the country.
So 3 days later, Nicolás Maduro was arraigned before the U.S. military, U.S. court, and he was brought in a military helicopter, he and the wife. He pleaded not guilty. He said he's a good man. He's an innocent man. He was kidnapped in his house, and he's still the president of Venezuela. But as we all know, once he was arrested, the following day, the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, was sworn in as Venezuela's president. If everything goes well per their constitution, within 1 month, she's supposed to organize an election to elect a new leader. The international body reacted. China, Russia, Iran, South Africa also reacted. And this is what the president of South Africa had to say.
It is our commitment to international law and the United Nations Charter that informs our deep concern and action of the United States in Venezuela, which has undermined the territorial integrity and sovereignty of a UN member state called Venezuela. We reject utterly the actions that the United States has embarked upon and stand with the people of Venezuela. And we demand the release of President Maduro and his wife as well. We reiterate our call for decisive action by the United Nations Security Council to fulfill its mandate and advance peace and security and uphold the rule of law. The National Executive Committee of the African National Congress yesterday issued a clear statement and a call rejecting what has been done in Venezuela and calling upon the immediate release of President Maduro. It is the principles of equality and justice.
Yeah. So other world leaders also reacted, and Ghana's foreign minister also released a statement. Now, fast forward, let's talk about the idea behind it. Is they took our oil, they took it away from us, and we need it back. Now, the truth is that Venezuela has been digging oil for the past, or for a century now. And in 1920, okay, as at 1920, U.S. oil companies, big oil companies, the likes of Gulf and Shell were already in Venezuela digging their oil. And Venezuela became very rich. As at 1970, Venezuela had the highest per capita income in the entire Latin American country. So the country became wealthy. And when these companies came in, they built schools, towns, they built hospitals, and so many other things for Venezuela. Then in 1976, Venezuela decided to nationalize its oil industry. And that is where the problem started. So they decided to nationalize it. The US companies made lots of losses, about up to 5 billion as at then. 5 billion losses. And the companies had to leave. Fast forward to 2007, when Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela. He called them back, but there were caveats. He gave them conditions that they are going to join local companies, that the local companies will hold the largest shares of the oil industry. They will extract the oil, sell, and then pay royalties. So some of the companies agreed, some didn't agree. Companies like the ConocoPhillips and Exxon Mobil, these companies refused. And then Chevron agreed. And up to now, the US company Chevron is still in Venezuela extracting oil. So these Exxon and ConocoPhillips took Venezuelan government to court, and they won the case. And the Venezuelan government was made to pay billions of money to these companies. So the government started paying these monies, but then US imposed sanctions on Venezuela. And once the US government imposed sanctions on Venezuela, the government couldn't pay again. The economy collapsed. The economy, shrinked, and they couldn't pay these companies again. And since then, it has been the oil company in Venezuela belongs to us, and we need our tin bag and all that. And these are the claims Donald Trump is making. So it's so unfortunate, but then that is a powerful company. So I'm asking you, who is an African, there are US companies, Canadian companies, Australian and French companies in your country mining gold and other other natural resources in your country. What will happen to you if your country decides to nationalize these mining industries? What will happen to your country? If the contract expires and they refuse to renew, what will happen to them? So I pose this question to you. It is high time we start acting now. This is a lesson for all African countries. This is a call for you to start to sit up. It took 115 minutes for the entire exercise. How much time will it take to arrest your president or to kidnap your country president? Because you can't even stand it. And that is what the Sahel is trying to do, trying to own the industry themselves now. Thank you very much for watching to this now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, kindly consider subscribing and clicking on the bell notification so that when we post other videos, you'll be among the first to watch it.